No. No. Next. There we go. All right, so this just gives you some idea of what it's going to look like when I get it all up and running. So this is an app I've created, and it has bookmarks. So as other farms get their data in and I get it in, there will be bookmarks for each farm. So you can jump back and forth between different farms. So right now you can jump back and forth between Stone Barns and Farm Hub. And on the Farm Hub data, I think, I'm not sure why some of these polygons aren't filled in. I can't remember if the initial data set I put in was limited, or if it's because some of the field name conventions were different on different sheets, and so it didn't merge them. So I have to go back in and clean and fix that. I suspect it's the latter.
I know, actually, I think I'm pretty sure it's the data, but
it's pretty can, okay. It's the data. Yeah. Okay.
This was a smaller sampling set.
A smaller sampling. Okay. But you can see, so the polygons. So here's the scale here, so you can get a relative sense. But the nice thing about this is you can click on any particular polygon, and it will tell you, you know, what the total carbon measurement was for that particular field. And, you know, this is soil health data, so we can do this for other things too. I started out with carbon. We can also look at other measurements that folks are interested in. With Farm Hub, I now have enough data from them. Once I fix all those field naming convention mismatches, what I'd like to do next is take that data and actually do a calculation of carbon stock change, because I now have 2 years data. I've already done this for Stone Barns, and so we can actually map out the carbon stock change between 1 year and the next for each farm. So I'll start that with Farm Hub since I have good data to do that. But you can see it's going to be really useful. And again, you know, obviously slightly different testing services, possibly slightly different sampling protocols, but it at least gives us a starting point to kind of compare and contrast each other's data, to visualize our own data, and hopefully that leads into phase 2. But I'd really love to get more farms in. So the more, you know, for those of you who have already done it, you can tell people how easy and painless it is. And hopefully, as I get more of your data fine-tuned, you can tell them how useful it is. But so yeah, so you can see I can go jump back to, of course, our picture was taken in the fall, so it looks like we live in the desert, and yours was taken during the season, so it's all nice and green. But same thing, we can click on a field and it'll tell you how much. Yeah, go ahead, Heather.
I just have a question, really probably for the group, but maybe I just am not in the know. Does this group want to actively recruit more farms? And is there a certain kind of farm? When you say, you know, talk to people and tell them how easy it was, who do you want to talk to? Who do you want us to talk to?
I mean, I think initially we'd like to get everyone who's a member of the Farm Data Working Group in, but certainly there'd be room to expand. You know, I would love to get more people into the Farm Data Working Group. And certainly I'd love to get data from more farms, you know, and eventually more conventional operations. It would be interesting to compare. But I think for now, the target is to try to at least get all the farms that are members of the Farm Data Working Group into this database.
Great. So just as an example, the reason that question came up for me, I just got out of another meeting with Cornell Extension, talking with a new extension agent in Ulster County who's got a lot of background in doing carbon flow analysis and footprints and all of that sort of thing. And she's still figuring out how she's going to do this, but I told her about Nika, and she was really interested in what we're doing. So down the road, could you see if she could bring in a few farms for this effort? Is that something that would be viewed positively by this group?
I would defer to Heather first and foremost, but I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Who's the agent you're speaking of?
I was hoping you would ask me. Her first name is Steph. She's very new. She was at Penn State.
Okay.
And she's in Ulster County. I can look up her name. But that, I think we all have a voice in deciding this. So am I right about that, Heather? Or does everything have to be sort of approved by Scenic Hudson here?
No, I definitely agree that everybody definitely has a voice. I agree that at a minimum, we should get all the data from this group. And is Hudson Carbon and Duke Farms the ones that you're lacking at this point? Have you had any?
Hudson Carbon and Duke Farms, and then I'll see what I have from Glenwood, and then hopefully we'll get the new and improved data very soon, and I'll get that in as well. So
Okay, I can actually help you with the Duke Farm. I'll do my best to get you a meeting with either Tom or Charles and try to get that advanced for you.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I'd love to do it in the next month or two, because this is a good time where I'm not super busy with field. I mean, it's still super busy, but it's not super busy with field work, so I'm a little more flexible. So this is a great time to both do the site visits and have the time to work with the data once I get it, because often it takes a lot of cleaning, and that's something to consider as folks are collecting data. If you are thinking of eventually putting your data in a database, definitely think about when you name fields or points, having a set convention and sticking with it. Even just something as little as putting a dash in one version and no dash in the other version. Database programs just don't see those things as the same, even though they're the same letters. It doesn't see them as the same thing, and so you get a mismatch and you can't join things together easily. So and it just takes time to go through and hand correct all that stuff. So definitely database thinking. I feel like I need to teach a course on database thinking like a database.
Yeah, and then just this would be my last question for today, but in general, do you see a value, or does this group see a value in bringing more, well, let's call them institutional farms into this? Is that preferred over private commercial farms, or is there any? These are questions that have been on my mind coming to this meeting today. So
can I respond with a thought? My personal thought is anyone who feels they have the capacity is welcome. I think the reason that we started with these institutional farms is it was farms that had resources where the sort of degree of sampling and the rigor with which we've sampling wouldn't be there was resources to support that, whereas that might be a burden on a private farm. And so I think in my mind, ideally it would be great to also have family farms and private farms, but they might need some support in order to actually be able to participate. That's my 2 cents on that. But I think it would be great to diversify, and larger data sets are better.
And I'm just wondering if there may be, I don't know this, just thinking today, there may be some farms in the region that are early entrants into some of these carbon markets, and they would are going to be the kinds of farms that they had the resources because they had to do that kind of characterization in order to enter a carbon market. So it just might be worth thinking about. Well, thank you. I mean, I just had some thoughts because I've been in meetings literally since 8 o'clock this morning, all around these issues with lots of different people. So I came to this. I've been having thoughts about NECA all day and kind of noted them. So thanks. So maybe, I'm sorry, just one more thing to let you know, I just learned about is that maybe you all know about it and I don't, but Pennsylvania, Penn State and Cornell are in the process of, or waiting to hear about funding to do a series of carbon farming videos. So if that's news to you, it's probably useful for us to know is happening. So that's it now. Sorry.
No worries. So I didn't want to speak for Hudson Carbon since Kaya and Mike are both on the call. So where are you guys at with possibly giving Elijah some data?
I think we would just need to set up a meeting time. I think we have a couple of different people that are fiddling around with the soil data at this point. So it's hard to get one person to respond to an email. So if you shoot one to both me and Mike, we'll figure it out between the two of us.
Okay, sounds good. And you know, I realize with COVID, maybe a site visit is a little fraught. I'm happy to do over Zoom if that works better. So don't let that be an impediment.
All right. Yeah, I think actually both Mike and I are offsite for the foreseeable future. So we could set you up with a site visit with somebody else, but we'd have to do the data transfer on Zoom.
Okay. Great. I'll reach out individually and try to schedule something. Thank you.
Great. Any other thoughts or comments about that?
I think that's all I have for phase one right now. Again, hopefully I'm taking a class right now through PSU. And that's going to be pretty intensive for the next week. But after that, I should have more time to get back to getting the data cleaned up. And hopefully I will resend out as soon as that new data is in. And the map is updated, I will update the story map and then resend that out to everybody in the group so you can take a look at that.
Great. And what's a good timeline for you, Elijah?
Let's say by the 21st.
Cool. Excellent. Well, you both have probably, I'm sorry, hold on for just 1 second. Just dropped my notebook. Okay, so I think the next thing I'd like to talk about is possibly putting out a NECA newsletter. So my thought on this right now, since I will be moving into a full-time project manager role for NECA, it's probably later this month. And so one thing I would really like to do is do a newsletter that showcases everything our partners are doing and possibly do a partner spotlight. And so if there's anything that's going on at each of your individual farms that you would like to showcase, I would like to be able to, to send that out also to our constituents. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or ideas about that.
I can definitely send you something, Heather. Yeah, we are going to be starting our warm season grass conversion project. So we're very excited about that. Beginning stages, but we've got the go ahead to start spending money. So that's the important part.
I think
Yeah.
Glenwood will have some interesting things to report next year, probably not this year, if we're speaking specifically about carbon projects.
I don't think it has to be limited to carbon. I think that, if you're doing anything with resiliency, anything that demonstrates any of the goals that could be relatable to this group, I think that that's great to share.
Okay, I don't want to commit to anything, but I'll think about it and see what we can see what we've got going that might be interesting and relevant.
On that note, I just wanted to update everyone. Our insect monitoring through DNA barcoding is proceeding. They're working on our library. It's a bit of a long process, and of course, it's been a little bit on hold over the holidays. But they have now sequenced approximately 8,300 of our 10,600 samples. And they haven't, basically the process is they'll sequence it, and then once they've done all the sequencing and they've done an error checking process where they look for mismatches and corrupted DNA, then all the good stuff they'll put into what are called bins. So, groups with very similar DNA. And then those bins will be run against the species database. That being said, the DNA is there in the database. So I can take the DNA and manually plug individual specimens in and ID them if there is a species ID, or, often at least I can get to family or genus. So I've been doing a lot of playing around in my spare time with running stuff, and what we're finding is just absolutely fascinating. Just a lot of diversity, a lot of really interesting biologies and ecologies, particularly related to farming. A lot of parasitoid wasps, looking through our flies, finding, I expected to find a lot of kind of, stable fly, house fly relatives that are more of a hindrance to the cattle than a help, but I'm actually finding lots of predatory flies and lots of parasitic flies as well. So just lots of interesting things coming through that data that I think are going to be really useful for envisioning the total ecology on the farm, as well as identifying some pest species too, that now we know they're there, we know what they are, we can actually look at, how big of a problem are they, look at biocontrol options, look at, how the ecological work is impacting those species for good or bad. So I'm thrilled, and we'll definitely be looking for grant funding to get lending malaise traps and be able hopefully, I'm really hoping this coming season we can start offering this to other farms to go through our bulk processing and hopefully be able to lend out some malaise traps for people to do that work. So stay tuned.
That would be great. I mean, we have a ready set of farms in our incubator programs and in the farmer training programs that we could engage somehow with that as well. They'd be interested to do that, and craft farms as well. So there's a pretty big network to do that. A question for all of y'all. Is anybody here using the Cool Farm tool? Because that's one thing we're doing, Heather, this year that might be of interest. We'll be using the Cool Farm tool for the first time. And also we're in the process of planning some tree planting, and we'll be using iTree to estimate sustainability benefits. So again, not focused only on carbon, but I'm hearing enthusiasm or appetite for maybe getting beyond just carbon, which is great. Anyway, so those are two projects that are probably worthy of article in your, or some content in your newsletter.
Heather, you're muted.
I'm not used to speaking so much in meetings. So no, I was just saying anything that has to do with climate resiliency, anything that has to do with improving conditions related to climate, I think could be relevant to this group. So that's awesome. I would love that. And also just to showcase our partners, you know, the work that you're doing. This is all really important. There's a climate component, but there's also the work that you're doing. So I think that all of those things would be really important to showcase. And just two things of note on the policy front. I just wanted to let everybody know, you probably already know this, but the Soil Health and Climate Resiliency Act was signed by the governor on December 22nd. So that's really good. The Department of Ag and Market will be required by the bill to engage in stakeholder outreach and establish voluntary standards for soil health reflective of geographic region, soil type, and farming methods. So I'll probably send out an e-blast about that early next week, so you can learn more about it there and any actions that might be or things to think about. And the other thing from the state of the state, the governor said that they would be increasing funding for the Climate Resilient Farming Program to help New York State farmers reduce impacts of agriculture on climate change and adaptation. So that's another thing just to make everybody aware of. So, like I said, I'll send out a little bit more information about that probably early next week.
Great.
Awesome. Well, does anybody have anything else they'd like to share?
Heather, I think I'm going to put you in touch with we have a new colleague, Ted. I don't know if he was there when you came by the farm, but I think later this spring will be deploying. We have a gas analyzer machine and we're going to be putting it out on some compost piles at a dairy. So I could really loop you in with Ted so he could talk to you about that.
That would be amazing. I'd love that. And Kaya, since you're on the phone, we had an inquiry about carbon sequestration in hemp. I know you have had some hemp. Do you have any data on that at this point?
I personally don't know. I think it's possible that some of our study fields have had hemp in them historically. None of them have had hemp since I joined, so I'm not super upfront or on the details there. But I think so. So I'll touch base with Mike and get back to you about that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Heather, I just had a thought. This may be too much structure for Nika at this point, but it would be helpful to me in terms of contributing to the newsletter if we had sort of a plan for the year, even if it's just this is a ambition, you know, and figure out sort of how you want to what the timing is on the newsletters and maybe a specific focus or just something that would help me be able to plug in at specific points. If you're up for that.
Yeah,
and if you
absolutely.
and if you want to, you know, create something and then shoot it to us and maybe get some input. But I find that when I'm asked to provide content, I'm happy to do it, but I need a little more frame for it just to make it work. For me to have some good thinking around it to really craft or tailor the content to the specific organization.
Sure, that makes total sense. I mean, honestly, I thought maybe this was kind of a brainstorming session to see what everyone here thought of it and what they would like to see in a newsletter. I think that was kind of my first thought. This is something we have not done before, and it's something that I want to do when I become the full-time project manager. And I was thinking quarterly as far as a timeline, since I'm the one that's probably going to have to put it all together. So I think quarterly is what I can probably handle at this point.
Well, I think since you'll be the driving force, figure out what works for you, and then maybe ask for some input. At least that's worked for me personally in the past with this sort of an organization.
No, I appreciate that. That's good. And I also thought that so there would be whatever the overall newsletter would be, and then, like I said, we'd spotlight one of our partners. So that would be where it'd be appropriate to just showcase anything that you thought was important and obviously relatable, to the mission of NECA, but that's kind of what I was thinking. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just to say, I think Farmhub would be happy to be involved in some kind of newsletter.
Awesome.
Not coming up with anything specific that we want to share, but hearing the context it's in, I think would help someone.
Great.
So Andrew, I wanted to let you know the course I'm taking right now. Kendrick is one of the teachers from Hawthorne Valley. And so he was talking the other day about your insect sample. So
What's the class you're taking? Is this the PSU?
it's
You're in
yeah, it's the PSU course. So it's a WASP ID course. So WASP identification and diversity course. So just we're learning basically how to ID wasps to super family and family level, and then kind of the biology and diversity within each of those groups. It's been great so far. If they do it again, I highly recommend it. It's a little time intensive, but it's only $60, and it's instructors from all over the world, experts in each taxa, lectures Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 2 weeks, 10 to 4, and then a 6 to 8 o'clock workshop section where you actually, it's like a lab where you ID they give you pictures from all angles of the wasps and you have to ID them. So I've been learning a ton.
Elijah, I think I'm going to let you be the NECA expert on wasps.
They're a fascinating group. I tell you, especially the parasitoid wasps it's amazing stuff. Really cool biology, really helpful to agriculture.
Is that the super tiny one you were telling me about?
That's one of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they range all over the place, but yeah, there's some that are, I was telling Heather, there's a family Trichogrammatidae, which is wasps that are so small that they're the only known animals without nuclei in the adult nerve cells because they don't have space for it. So basically, as they're developing, the nerve cell has a nucleus. It pumps out all the proteins the adult will need during its short lifespan, and then the nucleus goes away so they can pack more nerve cells in to the brain, into the adult brain for its lifespan. And their wings are basically like little feathery paddles, and instead of flying, they're so small they can't fly against the wind, so they just drift on the wind currents.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you also had said that you discovered a tick that you were not aware was in the area, right? The Asian longhorn tick, is that right?
Yep. So we had been noticing an uptick in our fields of large masses of nymphal ticks, and basically like personnel going out into the fields would just come out covered with hundreds to thousands of these little nymphal ticks. And someone from the park had thought that they were the Lone Star ticks, but it turns out almost all the ticks that were in our insect sample were the invasive Asian longhorn tick. And that has consequences for livestock and human health as well. But it's a little scary, but it's good to know that they're here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like something like that could be really useful to put in a newsletter because, it does actually affect regenerative practices, especially if it affects livestock. So, I think those kind of stories or those kind of connections, I think would be really important to let people know about as an example.
Yeah, in its native range, it has been known to transmit some livestock diseases, but it also just the sheer numbers can actually create secondary infections and problems, but also can just lead to lack of a failure to thrive in the cattle because they are actually losing so much blood.
So is this a good place to bring up a new agenda item, add an agenda item?
Sure.
So I have a specific request of this group, or at least I have a need that I'm hoping y'all can help me figure out how to meet. And that is, I've been working with Zero Foodprint. We have 3 pilot farms, and I've been doing the carbon farm planning for those 3 farms in the process of creating the information needed by Zero Foodprint to release the funds to implement carbon farming. And maybe I should back up. Is everybody familiar with Zero Foodprint? Do you know what this is? Very briefly, it's an organization got started in California. They focus on restaurants. They recruit restaurants to gather funds from customers, so a small additional fee that they gather. They give to Zero Foodprint, and Zero Foodprint makes a connection with farmers and a local agricultural advisory group, which can be government or private, and provides funds to implement carbon farming practices. So it's essentially, the way I think of it, is it is a restaurant industry funded source of agricultural conservation financial assistance. Does that all making sense to everybody, basically? So they've been operating in California, and then in Colorado, and they have been looking to the east, and they came to the to try to begin developing in the east, and they're operating in the Asheville area and also Hudson Valley, and Asheville, North Carolina. And sorry, that's relevant to me because that's where I just moved from. But so I'm in the process now. We're doing a pilot. They raised funds for 3 farms here in the Hudson Valley. And the next step then is to create a carbon farm plan for them, which I've done. Now, here's my specific need. There's an issue right now with how to account for, account's not the right word, estimate the carbon sequestration associated with compost applications. And the problem or the challenge is that there is a very limited amount of data from California that suggests that there's a very high rate of carbon accumulation after a compost application. And recently, there was I don't know who did the project, but California Conservation Organizations, the soil health program there, had a study done to provide new estimates of carbon sequestration potential from compost application. All right, that's all the context. Here's my need. When I use the existing estimates, they're about 4 times lower, and we're using Comet. They're 4 times Comet Planner. They're 4 times lower than this new estimate that has been developed for California soils. The way they were developed was simply running simulations using, I'm not going to say this right, but I'll bet you some, our friends from Hudson Carbon know it. It's like it's the New Hampshire, I think, carbon model. It's DNT something. Anybody, is that familiar?
The DNDC?
Yes, thank you. The DNDC. So somebody in California just ran the DNDC for California by county to based on the Marin project analysis results, and got this county level estimate of carbon sequestration. So here's my ask. Can we do that? Can NECA do that for us? Could we even just do a few counties in the Hudson Valley?
I have I'm not answering for NECA. I would defer to Heather on that. But just one sort of question that this brings up for me is I'm assuming that these numbers take into account the management practices that follow the compost application, because if you give me a rototiller, I can burn all that carbon up pretty quick. Or if you give me a herd of cows to manage on certain types of grasses with, holistic management like they did in the Marin project, then we can, theoretically the carbon is a catalyst. I think you can't ask this question without having the management practices baked into it. So that being said, I just wanted to offer that we actually are purchasing a bigger compost spreader and are going to start spreading compost on some of our fields that were old hay fields and have some of our lowest carbon numbers. And Elijah and I were talking about how to leave some sections out and research the difference. So we could potentially, if we are able to do that in a way that seems like it would provide some reasonably good data, we could be potentially an on the ground data point for that. And we have, our other management and other sort of baseline data that could help. I love the idea. I think that would be really cool because I have that question myself, and I think it's a really important calculation.
Yeah, so to address your first question, yes, it's a very specific set of conditions, so that's not an issue. And then second, my understanding is that the California project was not ground truthed. They took the basic input, or probably just the process values, and put them into this DNDC model and had output, and that's what they're using.
Cool.
So it's really just, and I think, and I don't know this specific model. I've got a lot of experience modeling carbon nitrogen relations in cropping systems, but I don't know this model, so I don't know how difficult it is, and I don't know what the inputs are required are. That's what I was hoping. I wanted to ask the question here because this is a good brain trust for these sorts of questions. But it's not a case of we need to do field research to ground truth. That's not what happened and so what I understand happened in California, and it was accepted as legitimate, was they took some specific point estimates from research around the state, primarily the Marin carbon research, and used and then set the different process values or input values according to that and just ran it. And they're using those numbers. So I think.
What are they using the numbers for?
That it's been described to me as they use the numbers. It's been described to me as they use the numbers in the DNDC model. So I'm imagining based on that they're somehow finding some constants or something that is allowing them to then to tailor that DNC the NDC output to the California conditions. But I don't know, and it's a great question, Kai, and I need to know more. I need to know more about that. But the reason I'm bringing it to you is, one, you're folks that are right now are the people I know that are really thinking deeply about carbon and soil and all this stuff. But the other reason is that I see this as possibly fairly low-hanging fruit that NECA could produce pretty quickly with the right partners. I'm going to bring this up to Skidmore when they come in 2 weeks, and so maybe they'll know more. But it just seems to me that it's not that difficult if you have the model and you have experience running it. It would just be a matter of grabbing some whatever data we've got for Hudson Valley conditions and playing with it a little bit and stick it in the model.
Right. That would be my first thought, is that if they initialize the model using the California on the ground compost data, then we would probably need on the ground Hudson Valley data to
Exactly.
initialize the model here. Yeah.
Yeah. But they did that with existing data. They didn't do any new research to find that. So I think it's a possibility. Here's the bigger issue that I think is something NECA wants to think about. As these different private carbon farming initiatives ramp up, I think this lack of specific information about our soil carbon dynamics here could possibly reduce our competition with other parts of the country, because we're left with only being able to use existing data, which is right now, as I understand it, in New York, it's Comet Planner or Comet. I mean, those are the two options. And already, and the reason I'm sharing this now with this group is that I'm feeling, as the carbon planner, farm planner in this project, this zero footprint pilot, I'm feeling pressure to up my estimates of carbon sequestration, because, and try to figure out how to do that, because zero footprint, what they're interested in is the return on the investment of funding. So if I could say, and I'm getting some pressure from different people within the organization, within Zero Footprint, to just use the California numbers, that would be fine. As a soil scientist with lots of years of experience looking at soil health and carbon nitrogen relationships, that doesn't feel legitimate to me. And so right now I'm pushing back on that. But what I find is interesting is the pressure I'm feeling just to say, oh, sure, okay, it's going to make your program look better. Your investors will be happier. Do you see where I'm going with this? I mean, because I could, it's fine with zero footprint for me to quadruple the estimates of carbon sequestered. Quadruple them, which is what we're talking about. And everybody wins that's engaged in this thing, except the planet, right? Everybody wins. We all look like bigger heroes. The farmers are bigger heroes. The restaurant industry is happy. So I think that's where we're going, where all this carbon market stuff is likely going. But I think I'm just bringing it to you. I don't even have a really coherent proposal for you yet, although I could do it. I think that it would be very helpful as we move into this. I think a real contribution that NECA could make is to figure out where we can do these quick, legitimate, but quick new values for carbon sequestration potential. So not years and millions of dollars of study, but be smart about how we use what we already know and plug it into existing models. So I'll stop there. Thanks for listening. Any thoughts?
I have two just quick thoughts that just popped up while you were talking. One is that I think increasingly at Hudson Carbon, we're thinking beyond carbon, ironically. And just because of exactly this, what's happening with the carbon markets, where measurements and sample stratification and all these things are being done to manipulate the figures at the beginning, at the end, so that everybody wins except the planet. So looking more at things like how your water quality is doing and how much water you have on your farm and what's up with biodiversity, I think is definitely for people who are seeing this as less of a money-making venture and more of as actually an ecological need that we're trying to do, moving away from carbon and towards some of these other metrics, I think is important. And then the other thing that came to mind while you were talking is I think that the DNDC and like other models that come up may be sort of low-hanging fruit in terms of workload and time, and what they give you seems really concrete, but I do think that they require some amount of ground truthing on the other end. Like if we're running things in the Northeast that are based on figures that came out of the Moraine Carbon Project, I think that's a fine facsimile. But if we're really trying to do our due diligence by the science, we would want figures from our climatic zone. So if you at Stone Barns are going to already be doing something like that, I think that's definitely something to think about using as a backstop to some of those DNDC models, where it's like, if they're giving you numbers that are actually impossible, it would be really good to know that.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that occurs to me is, I mean, we have an estimate from 2020 to 2021 of carbon change in a year. I don't know if that's useful.
Not in my opinion. I don't know what Kaya may think, but yeah, that's based on my understanding of soil carbon dynamics. No, not too useful.
Yeah. 3 years but like a low minimum.
It's like really low minimum. Yeah, thank you. And I do always want to remember and remind everyone, when we do have an existing data set, it's called COMET. And that is, we do have that. But I'm just interested. I was interested. I wanted to pose the question to this group to see if there was any good thoughts about, oh yeah, we got that model, and oh yeah, sure, we can, if you give us the new inputs, we can run that for you. Because that's what I'd like. That's what I'd like. Ideally, kind of quickly, because I'm supposed to be delivering these proposals, and I'd really like to have a good argument for why it is. You know, I'd like them to look a little more competitive, because right now a farm in California put a ton of compost down is going to get 4 times the benefit. The carbon sequestration benefit will be 4 times what it is here. So I hope this wasn't just like down a rat hole y'all didn't want to go, but I do see this as an issue. This is an issue, and it seems to me that this is the kind of thing that NECA could really help with.
I think the other interesting way to frame that is like in 20 years, those farms in California might face 4 times the backlash, you know? So it's like, it's a right now versus what's going to happen later problem, where like, if the models are wrong, what happens? But yeah, we work with the people who are putting together the DNDC model. We've been feeding our data to them for the past couple of years. So the guy who we're in contact with is named Kyle Arndt. It's ARNDT. And I don't know what his workload is. Like, I'm not sure if he would be able to run these models, but he's certainly the guy that you could talk to about finding somebody who does know, or just basically what's involved there. I'm
Yeah.
not super involved in that part of the project, but he's the point man there.
And was I right? Is it a New Hampshire model?
Yeah,
That-
he's a postdoc at the University of New Hampshire, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. The other place I thought we might get some cooperation is with the Terraton Challenge folks. The what's the name of the Indigo Ag? My understanding is they are using the DNTC model.
I don't know.
So yeah. So then at this point, do I have Nika's blessing to do a little poking around and seeing if I can find a partner to give us a fast product?
Well, when you say a partner, I mean, I feel like the people who would be most receptive would be the people in this group. So
No. I mean Indigo Ag or
Oh.
University of New Hampshire or somebody who has the model, has the experience. If they could tell us what data we need to provide them with some initial regional characteristics, boom, then they do it. I mean, I could do this also as Glenwood, and I'm really comfortable doing that. But I just wanted to, maybe at this point, I'm offering to make this a Nika thing, and happy to do that if you'd like.
Yeah, if you could send me an email with like all the information, that would be really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would also be interesting to see the, you know, who bites, because to my mind, like Indigo Ag and University of New Hampshire would have a lot of different, I don't know, those are pretty different entities that I trust in very different ways.
But they're using the same model. I mean, that's the point. I'm just looking at simulation model and
Yeah.
who has that knowledge and who has the ability to do something quickly. And then the last thing to know, just so y'all know, is I know some folks that are working in the carbon program at Indigo Ag. So I have easy access to just ask this question informally. Hey, could y'all do this for us? So perhaps if it's more comfortable for this group, I'll begin this conversation. I would be doing this regardless of whether or not I was involved in this group here. So perhaps I'll just own it for a little while, and then once it's a little more clear, I can bring it back and offer it to Nika if there's interest. How about that? Is that more comfortable?
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Okay, I'll do that because I need it in my role right now at Glenwood. I need some, I want to try to improve these proposals I'm creating for zero footprint. So I'm happy to just do it on my own. And I'll let y'all know. I'll let you know what happens.
Great. Yeah, I'll be very interested to hear what kind of data they need to input into the model as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay. I'm done. Thank you.
Anybody have anything else?
no.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for your time. As usual, I will write up the notes and send those out as quickly as I can, probably by tomorrow afternoon or Monday. And I hope everybody has a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Bye.